Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Racing Form webinar on the Belmont Stakes and the Met Mile. I'm Brad Free and pleased to be joined by handicapper horse players Andy Beyer and Steve Crist. Andy Beyer is a published author whose works include Picking Winners and Beyer on Speed. Andy also produces the Beyer Speed Figures that are published exclusively in Daily Racing Form past performances. Steve Crist is an author, former publisher of Daily Racing Form, former editor-in-chief of the Racing Times, former vice president at New York Racing Association. Andy and Steve, thanks for taking time to talk handicapping this afternoon.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, before we jump into the Belmont Stakes and the Met Mile, just a real quick reminder, Daily Racing Form is offering a Belmont Stakes promotion that includes past performances, clocker reports, betting strategies, and more. You can save up to 52% on PPs, clocker reports, betting strategies. Visit shop.drf.com. Okay, before we start talking about the Belmont Stakes specifically, let's talk a little bit about the quality of this year's three-year-old crop overall. Andy, the speed figures that these three-year-olds have been earning have been good, but not extraordinary. Yet there is a line of thinking out there that this year's crop is above average. What's your take?
I think they are above average. I'm enthusiastic about it, and I think by the end of the season, we're going to be extolling the crop of this season.
Steve, what's your take? Do you share Andy's sentiment regarding the strength of this year's three-year-olds, or is it too early to tell?
I share the sentiment that it's possible they're above average, but I'd sure like to see it, especially a little later in the season, and finally when they meet the older horses toward the end of the year. I mean, when Fierceness and Sierra Leone met their elders in the Breeders' Cup, they showed just how good those two three-year-olds were. It's when they're only running against one another, it's a little harder to gauge.
Well, it's still early in the season. We're only in June, but I will say this about the best three-year-olds. Their form has been consistent. Their figures are solid. Their figures have been reproduced time and time again. And in the case of the top three finishers in the Kentucky Derby, distance certainly does not appear to be an issue. But Steve, I agree. When they start meeting the likes of, Fierceness, White Barrio, and Nisos a little bit later in the season, we'll have a little bit better gauge on how good this three-year-old crop really is. It looks like it could be very good. The top three finishers from the Kentucky Derby are back in the Belmont. So let's at least reflect on what transpired the first Saturday in May at Churchill Downs. Steve, I'll ask you first. Did the best horse, Sovereignty, the winner, was he best on the first Saturday in May? Or is there a case can be made maybe the second and third place finishers could have won the race?
No, I think that Sovereignty won the race on the level. He drew clear. They weren't really gaining on him. But that doesn't mean it has to come out the same way when these three horses meet again, because I think, especially in the case of Baeza, these horses have not run very often. They still have ceiling.
Andy, how about you? What's your take on the Kentucky Derby win by Sovereignty? Was he the best horse that day, in your opinion?
He won the race fair and square, absolutely. He and journalism, both made their moves in the, in mid-stretch, in the middle of the racetrack. I mean, neither had a real excuse from the standpoint of a tough trip, or not any tougher than the Derby usually is. And Sovereignty was the best. We'll see if he can continue to be better than journalism, though. I think that journalism maybe has another notch above what he showed at Churchill Downs.
Well, he certainly has a little bit more seasoning, having run in the Preakness Stakes 3 weeks ago. If the Belmont Stakes at a 1.25 miles is a virtual rerun of the Kentucky Derby, there is that one catch, and that is that Sovereignty and Baeza, 1-3 Derby finishers, have not raced in the 5 weeks since, whereas Journalism wheeled back 2 weeks later to win the Preakness. He'll be the only horse this year to contest all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. So before we talk about journalism and his ability or potential to reproduce his form, let's touch on the annual debate. And it was fueled this year when Kentucky Derby winner Sovereignty did not run back in the Preakness Stakes. And every spring we hear this cry that, well, the Triple Crown races need to be changed. There needs to be more spacing. Andy, what's your opinion on the annual debate regarding the spacing and timing of the Triple Crown races?
Well, much of the industry has rejected the current schedule. I mean, the fact that that Sovereignty didn't show up, and Belmont just really never gave the Preakness much of a thought because of the 2 week gap. It blew up the whole series. Now, I mean, the Preakness without the Derby winner is really lacking. And I got to say, I was disappointed in Mott and in Sheikh Mohammed. I mean, this is a sport. You can't wait for everything to materialize in your favor before you elect to compete. I mean, Sovereignty, was evidently in good health. I mean, he was described as like being like a tiger when he got off the van after leaving Churchill Downs. Let him run. I was impressed, after when the spokesman for the journalism ownership group was asked about running in the Preakness. He made the point that that there are a lot of Europeans in the ownership group, and they wanted to support American racing. They didn't want to just back off from this country's greatest attraction. They felt an obligation to show up. Well, why didn't Bill Mott? I just thought it was it was very unfortunate, that your legacy in this Triple Crown series is that you blew it up.
Well, Andy thinks there could potentially be changes to the Triple Crown sequence moving forward. But Steve, you served as vice president at NYRA, and I'm sure this conversation took place often. What's your take on tinkering with the Triple Crown races?
I'm opposed to tinkering with the Triple Crown races. And, just for the record, I worked at NYRA 30 years ago. There were no discussions about the spacing of it. This has really been a recent thing of, trainers preferring to back off. I mean, coming back in 2 weeks in the Preakness was just fine for 100 years. And then with this kind of, more chill European style of racing, people going, oh, I'd rather run my horses every 5 weeks. Okay, if that's what you'd rather do. I mean, like Andy, I'm disappointed Sovereignty didn't run. I mean, how many chances is Godolphin or Belmont going to get to win a Triple Crown? At the same time, I'm not going to tell Belmont where to run his horses. He's been doing this for a long time very well. And, you hate to tell someone you think they should do something with their horse that they're not comfortable doing. You never want to be in that position. But okay, I when Bill announced that Sovereignty wasn't running, he said, I think the Triple Crown is a great thing as it's currently constructed. It's just not right for my horse. Okay, fine. So Sovereignty's not going to be a Triple Crown winner. But to me, so much of the appeal and the charm and the reason that it holds the public's interest, is for the Preakness to be 2 weeks after the Derby. People who want to create some new series where horses run at different distances every 5 weeks, great, fine, go create that series, but it ain't the Triple Crown.
No, it's not the Triple Crown. And the Triple Crown has been pretty special over the years. Is one reason why only a handful of horses have won it. The Belmont Stakes, year in and year out, often anyway, is called the Test of Champions. But last year, this year, and next year, it's not a mile and a half at Belmont. It's a mile and a quarter at Saratoga. So my question to both you guys, Steve, what effect, if any, does it make that the Belmont is running 1.25 miles this year as opposed to 1.5 miles.
Well, I think when you have the combination of, good horses, kind of top tier in this race, and a distance that's not new to anyone, that they've all run well at 1.25 miles in the past. So I think the distance change removes that kind of randomness where you look up and some $80 horse won and you go, oh, I guess it was the distance.
Andy, how about you? Does the shortened distance of the Belmont Stakes make any difference, handicapping or otherwise?
No, I prefer it just because the Belmont at 1.5 miles added an element, an unknown element, because American horses almost never run at 1.5 miles on the dirt, and um, they're not bred to do it. So I'd rather have more knowable factors going into the race. I mean, you look at the roster of Belmont winners in the last 20 years. Boy, there are a lot of unfamous names on that list. I think we could. Let's say I know Steve is a traditionalist. I could live without a 1.5 miles Belmont.
All right. Well, we're going to have 1.5 miles Belmont in spring of 2027. By then, Belmont Park will be renovated and the Belmont Stakes will be back at 1.5 miles. This year, however, it's run at the same distance as the Derby, 1.25 miles, but there are fewer starters, 8 opposed to 19 in the Kentucky Derby. It looks like a little bit less pace, certainly a different surface than Churchill Downs. So let's go ahead and take a look at the field for the Belmont Stakes. A field of 8 entered. And I suppose we could start our conversation talking about the morning line favorite Journalism or Kentucky Derby winner Sovereignty, the second choice. But I believe that one of the most important horses in any race, at very least, it's a huge consideration, is who sets the pace and how fast do they go. So let's start off talking about Rodriguez and his potential pace adversary, Crudo. Andy, how do you see this race unfolding? Specifically, will those two front runners ensure a legitimate pace for the rest of the runners to run at?
Yes, so Rodriguez will go to the lead and then lose. That's my prediction, and I think it's a safe one. He's just not. He's not as good as these horses, and yeah, we're all oriented toward looking at the main speed in races, and looking for upsets when horses get loose on the lead. There's just too much competition in here. I mean, Rodriguez, when he scored his one win of note in the Wood Memorial, that was a nothing field, and to me he's not a viable contender in this race, speed or no speed.
For viewers out there wondering why Rodriguez was not in the Kentucky Derby, he actually was, but he came up with a foot issue that required time for trainer Bob Baffert to deal with. Rodriguez reportedly is training very well for his first start in 2 months, and he's a threat, I think, on the front end. Steve, let me ask you a question, because when we talked about the Kentucky Derby 5 weeks ago, your opinion was based largely on the premise that the Wood Memorial was a fast, good race. In fact, you picked Grande, the runner-up in the Wood. Do you still see the Wood as being a potential key race with regards to the Belmont Stakes?
Not as a potential key race for the Belmont. I still do think it was indisputably a good and fast race. And we're going to hear from Rodriguez at some point when he gets loose going 9 furlongs, maybe something like the Haskell. But for things to have gone wrong for him physically to the point where he had to miss the Derby, and now he's coming in off a very long layoff, going 1.25 miles. I think he'll take them to the top of the stretch, but 2 or 3 of the favorites are supposed to run by him.
Okay, we'll find out on Saturday at Belmont Park. And I think a lot of it is going to depend on how much pressure Crudo applies to Rodriguez. If those two hook up, then they both will back up. I think that Rodriguez has a chance to possibly steal it if he can clear away from Crudo. Okay, the horse that benefited greatly from the contested pace in the Kentucky Derby was Sovereignty. there are reasons to wonder if Sovereignty can run two alike. The pace is going to be probably a little less severe in the Belmont. It's a smaller field, a different surface. It's the same good horse. But Steve, how likely is Sovereignty to bookend the Triple Crown races?
Yeah, it could happen. I prefer the other two horses, but for pick X purposes, I'm sorry if it sounds like the coward's way out. I'm using all three of them on my tickets. They're all capable of winning, and I think they're all better than the rest of the field.
Sovereignty is a very good horse. He also had advantageous conditions, in my opinion, in the Kentucky Derby over a Churchill Downs track that he absolutely loves. Not that he doesn't like Saratoga, but two of the best races in Sovereignty's career were the Street Sense last fall and, of course, the Kentucky Derby in early May. Andy, same question. What needs to happen for Sovereignty to make him be the Derby and Belmont Stakes winner?
Well, he's going to need to jury, which I don't think. I mean, obviously, it can happen. It's happened once, but I must say, I don't fall in love with horses very often. I thought that journalism's win in the Preakness was as scintillating a horse race as I've seen in a long, long time. I would rate it as, for me, the most exciting race in the Triple Crown series since Rachel Alexandra won in 2009. I mean, his finish was just stunning. I mean, the Equibase, part of their accumulation of racing data, they have a GPS timing system that gives you the what I hope are really accurate breakdowns of fractional times, and with 1/16 of a mile left in the race, according to their data, journalism was 0.65 seconds off the lead. That's a little over 3 lengths, and to make up that ground in that short of time was just stunning. I can't remember a more exciting finish, and I think the public reacted that way. I got more calls or texts from people, 2 or 3 of whom started with the same word. Wow. That it was a phenomenal effort. And I respect Sovereignty because he did outfinish journalism legitimately in the Kentucky Derby. And if you can outfinish journalism one time, that's a heck of an achievement. But I just feel that journalism is going to really, he's going to go onward and upward from the Preakness.
All right. As far as my take on Sovereignty goes, having underestimated him once already this spring, I'm reluctant to make the same possible mistake this time, but he's not in my top 3 for some different reasons. However, Andy, you were talking about journalism's win in the Preakness. So why don't, just for the sake of remembering exactly what transpired, let's take a quick look at the stretch run of the Preakness Stakes and watch Journalism, who looked like he came off the bid on the far turn. That's him one off the rail in the red cap. And Umberto Rispoli, at this stage of the race, has really no option except to bulldoze in between 2 other horses. He created room, and even at the 8th pole, it looked like Gosker was long gone, but Journalism's explosive rally, as Andy just alluded to, was phenomenal. You're not supposed to make up 5 lengths in the stretch of a grade 1 dirt race, but that's exactly what Journalism did, and he won the race going away. So Journalism is the 8-5 favorite. Andy, what about the fact that he's making his 3rd start in 5 weeks? Is that any concern to you?
I'll repeat something that Steve said early. Horses ran 3 times in 5 weeks. an awful lot during the course of American racing. I mean, I leave it to the trainer to judge that, but I'm, I think if the horse is in this series and they're he's going to be ready.
Steve, what about you? I know you touched on it earlier. Third start in 5 weeks. I have nothing but confidence in trainer Michael McCarthy, who's one of the top trainers out in California. If journalism wasn't right for the Preakness, he wouldn't have been in there. If he wasn't right for the Belmont, he would not have been in here. But is the 3 starts in 5 weeks a consideration, especially considering that his two main rivals are coming in off a 5 week break?
To me, the 3 races in 5 weeks is a feature. It's not a bug. I don't certainly hold it against journalism. I salute his people for running in all 3 races, and I hope he runs very well. And the next time someone goes, "Oh, you can't run a horse 3 times in 5 weeks," we can go, "Hey, look what journalism did last year."
I expect journalism to run his race again on Saturday. The one possible chink in his armor, and I might be overanalyzing, I did not like the fact that he appeared to come off the bit into the far turn, and for just a split second, it looked like Rispoli, who was writing journalism, had no horse. It turns out he did have a horse, but journalism came off the bit briefly. That lack of interest or lack of focus at that stage of the race is a little bit curious, I thought. But journalism, he certainly finished well in the Preakness, and he was best on that day. Okay, third choice in the Belmont Stakes on the morning line is Baeza, third place finisher in the Kentucky Derby. He is fresh, 5 weeks between starts, but he has faced journalism twice. Journalism beat him twice. Baeza has faced Sovereignty once. Sovereignty beat him, and Baeza faced Rodriguez earlier this year, and Rodriguez beat him. So, Steve, let me ask you, what needs to happen for Baeza to turn the tables on 3 good horses who have already defeated him?
He needs to take another step forward. He needs probably to run a career best, and I think he's capable of doing it. Each time that he met each of those horses that you talked about, Baeza was the less experienced racehorse. He has the fewest career starts of the group. He has the most upside, the most potential to improve. I think he's going to run a huge race, and it'll be fascinating to see whether it's good enough to beat the Derby and Preakness winners.
Andy, his Beyer speed figures, Baeza's figures have gone forward every single start. He's a relatively late foal, May 13th. He's still developing. What chance do you give Baeza to possibly spring an upset?
I know his Derby certainly showed that he's close to these horses. As I say, I'm so much in the journalism camp now that I'm not going to be looking for him to improve and turn the tables. But I would like to say one thing about journalism, since you brought up the subject of speed figures. He earned a very mediocre speed figure in the Preakness, a 98, and you had asked me earlier in the week, how do you view the kind of low figures that horses in the Derby and the Triple Crown have been earning in recent years? And this is something I have thought about a long time, because when we started making figures in the mid '80s, horses would the average winning figure in the Triple Crown races was around 110. Unbridled ran 116 in the Derby. Summer Squall ran a 118 in the Preakness. And now, all the numbers are closer to 100. And for a long time, I wondered if maybe there was some aberration in our figures. Were they shrinking over time? And why this was happening? And it took me a long time, but I had a revelation last year Uh, and here's the answer or the explanation to the low figures in recent years. As Steve, as you were just saying, horses just don't run the demanding schedules that they used to. Trainers have it in their minds. Oh, we can't go from the Derby to the Preakness in 3 weeks. We need we need a 5 weeks to from the last prep race to the Kentucky Derby, or 4 weeks rather than a week or two. And I believe that the decline in figures is attributable to the change in styles. In training styles. I believe that horses just are not as sharp and fit. They do not have the kind of bottom that they're supposed to have to run in demanding races like this. And the what convinced me of this most of all was last year's Triple Crown Series, followed by 5 months later the Breeders' Cup. I mean, you had Mystic Dan, winning the Derby with a figure of 100, and and then the two horses behind him, ran ran figures of 98. I mean, Forever Young and Sierra Leone. 5 months pass. These horses now are having real racing campaigns. They go into the Breeders' Cup, and they're conditioned, they're relatively fit, and the winning figure in the Breeders' Cup Classic was 112. And I think that this to me was the answer to this mystery, that horses have not been campaigned to be really tight and fit on the first Saturday in May, or even in the early parts of their career. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the old days, horses had tough schedules. Kerry back in 1961 had 26 starts going into the Kentucky Derby. He was pretty darn fit, I suspect. And again, in the old days, 2-year-olds had campaigns. I mean, they would, horses would race at Belmont in the spring, and then they'd go to Saratoga and have like as many as 4 starts, maybe more, in a 4-week period. Boy, they were fit by the September of their 2-year-old season. You don't get that kind of regimen anymore. So I think that's the reason you see even good horses, earning mediocre figures in the Triple Crown. They're not ready to deliver a max effort, but maybe in November they will be.
Well, we got 5 months to go until November, and you're right about the figures, Andy. In fact, in the last 15 years, I looked at the median winning figure for the Kentucky Derby is 103. Sovereignty got a 104. Okay, right there. Preakness, median winning Preakness figure over the last 15 years, 102. Journalism a little bit lower than that, 4 points lower. He got a 98. They're not as fast anymore, the 3-year-olds, for reasons possibly outlined by you. As far as back to Baeza, I like his chances in the Belmont Stakes. I know that you look at his past performances and you see he rallied from 15th in the Kentucky Derby. Baeza, in my opinion, has more tactical speed than he showed in that race. He broke from the far outside post. His jockey Flavian Prat just let all the traffic clear and then tried to work out a trip. I think that Baeza can be more forwardly placed in the Belmont than he was in the Kentucky Derby, and I expect him to run a lot better with that 5-week break. Okay, let's talk about a live long shot. I think he's live anyway. It's a horse by the name of Hill Road, and he kind of burst onto the scene last fall at Del Mar when he finished third at a giant number in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He had some hiccups along the way, now trained by Chad Brown. He won the Peter Pan Stakes last time out, Hill Road did. Hill Road is not fast enough yet. His highest figure is a 94, but he is likely to move forward with a race under his belt, wouldn't you think? And does he have a chance to spring an upset?
I just don't think so. I mean, I always have to respect Chad Brown. Whenever I dismiss him, I usually wind up regretting it. But I just don't. I think there's just too much of a gap between his level of achievements and the other horses. That wasn't the greatest of Peter Pan fields, and his career best is a 94. Since we know that journalism's probably going to run in the stratosphere on Saturday, he's got to improve a lot.
He's going to have to improve at least 10 points to be in the same realm with Sovereignty, Journalism, and Baeza. Steve, how about you? Does Hill Road have any chance at all? I can't overlook the fact that he was good enough to finish third in the Breeders' Cup, and he's coming in off a confidence-building win last out. Any chance for Hill Road to upset?
If you told me you can't have any of the three favorites, who do you like? I'd take him. And I looked at him a long time, and I tried to make him because Chad Brown is so dangerous, and so many of his lightly raced horses, who appear to have figures that are a little too slow. I mean, there's a reason he's had these horses all this time and campaigned them the way he did. And I think he's always thought this was a good horse. It's still asking a great deal. As Andy said, it wasn't much of a Peter Pan. He was visually, looked good running down the leader, but this is a whole different universe of grade one quality that he's going to be seeing here.
I agree. I think Hill Road's up against it, but like Steve said, if you're shopping for a double-digit price, third in the Breeders' Cup, winner of the Peter Pan, he's trying to do what Tonalist did in 2014 and Arcangelo in 2023, parlay a Peter Pan win into a Belmont upset. Okay, it's time for our picks. Let's take a look real quick at who we picked on top, and this time I'm not alone. Steve, you're looking for Baeza to spring the upset over Journalism. What's the key for Baeza? Is it the fact that he's maturing and still kind of lightly raced and on the upswing?
Yeah, I think he has a better chance than maybe the other two favorites of taking a big step up to a new career top. And if you're giving me 2-1 on the other two and 4-1 on Baeza, I think Baeza is the value.
I agree, 4-1. Andy, you picked Journalism in the Kentucky Derby. He ran well. You picked him in the Preakness. He ran well again. You're sticking to Journalism. What's the main reason?
The wow factor.
The wow factor. Okay, that's good enough. And that was a wow performance in the Preakness Stakes. For a horse to do what he did, bulldoze through traffic, it takes an exceptional horse to do that and to maintain form during what is apparently, it seems like, an ambitious campaign. You respect Sovereignty and Baeza. Those are the top three from the Kentucky Derby. I picked Baeza in the Kentucky Derby. I don't know if there was any scenario under which he would have finished in front of Sovereignty or Journalism, but he did get bogged in traffic at the head of the lane, Baeza did. I don't know that he had a fair chance. I'm hoping he's more forwardly placed on Saturday, right behind the speed, likely to be set by Rodriguez and Crudo. I think Baeza can spring an upset, and if he misses again, it's going to be probably to Journalism, who I have nothing but respect for. I do also believe that Rodriguez has a chance on the front end to spring an upset, and Sovereignty, underrated him in the Derby, might be making the same mistake this week in the Belmont. So Steve likes Baeza, Andy Journalism, and I like Baeza too. All right. Is there betting value in an 8-horse field? Maybe at 4-1. We're doing 2 races on this webinar, and traditions do change. Some of them change temporarily. The Belmont Stakes at 1.25 miles instead of 1.5 miles. And other traditions are more permanent. It transpired about 12 or 13 years ago. The Met Mile, once upon a time, was the fixture on Memorial Day. They changed it to Belmont Day, and we are left with a field of 5 in the Belmont Stakes So let's go ahead now. Before we start talking about the five runners in the Metropolitan Handicap, I got two questions for you guys. First of all, to Steve, the configuration, the one-turn configuration at Saratoga, they run out of the Wilson chute. Does it make any difference, this new configuration at Saratoga?
Oh, I think it absolutely does. I think there's a world of difference between a two turn, or in this case, 1 2/3 turn, or something like that. But it's not an extended sprint out of a chute the way that the traditional Met Mile was. And that that makes it more like the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile than like the old Met Mile. Having said that, you've got a couple of seriously very, very good fast horses in here who both excel at a mile, and I can't wait to see them hook up.
Andy, what about you? Does this new configuration at Saratoga of 1 mile dirt make any difference as opposed to the traditional Met Mile at Belmont?
In a field of five, I mean, it's probably, it's probably not going to make a difference. I mean, the mile at Saratoga is kind of a funky race. I mean, the way the horses, angle at the start. I mean, but I don't think that's going to make much of a difference. And this is basically a 2-horse race anyway. I think Fierceness is clearly the one to beat, and White Abario second best. It's a little disappointing to see a race of, like the Met Mile, come up with such a thin field. I mean, wow, I was just looking at its roster of winners over the years, and there aren't many races in this country that that have been won by really elite horses, and even in recent years, well, it's produced 2 of the last 3 horses of the year. So I mean, that's you can't say it's losing its luster, but I wish this renewal were a little meatier.
The Met Mile is the first leg in a $5 daily double, the Met Mile to the Belmont Stakes. Steve, I want to ask you just real briefly, there are a myriad of wagering opportunities and possibilities and options on both Friday and Saturday at Belmont Park. How does a bettor prevent just becoming completely overwhelmed by all the choices that are out there?
It's a little bit like playing in a handicapping tournament. You've got to have everything mapped out in advance and written out, and you can't be handicapping during the day. Do your homework in advance. There are 6 pick fives on Friday on a 14 race card. There are 6 pick fives on Saturday on a 14 race card. You can't play all 12 pick fives. So decide what you're doing early. I always advise people play the last pick 5 if you're only going to play one, because that one allegedly is not open to CAW players. And that's supposedly just for the retail customers. So, you won't have guys bombing $500,000 into those pools. So if you're going to play one, play 10 through 14.
All right, good advice. Let's go ahead and handicap the Met Mile and take a look at the field. Only 5 entered. I would argue that it's a little bit more than a 2-horse race. It would have been nice if the field had been larger. It would have been nice to see Nisos in this race. He was dominant in the Triple Bend last weekend at Santa Anita. But let's start off talking real briefly about the horse that I expect is going to be on the lead, and that's one reason why I think Raging Torrent at least must be considered. He's won 5 of his last 6 sprints. He won the Malibu. I know he beat Stronghold. It's just probably a cut below. He won the Godolphin Mile, and Raging Torrent is good. What's to prevent him from taking the lead and posting a gate to wire upset? Andy, what about you?
He can, but this is a kind of a moto low speed. I just don't. You're up against 2 really solid uh, uh, high class horses in here in Fierceness and White Barrio, and I just I just think that Raging Torrent is a notch below.
Steve, am I crazy to suggest that Raging Torrent has a chance in this race?
Well, as our friend and mentor Joe Hirsch used to like to say, speed is always dangerous.
It certainly is.
But I just don't see this horse holding off a pair of champions in Fierceness and White Barrio. I don't think he's as good, but yes, loose speed is always dangerous.
Well, down on the inside post is Fierceness, who's been doing most of his running around 2 turns of late. What about the cutback, Steve, from 2 turns to one? And I know it's only a 5-horse field, but he's still going to have to negotiate some sort of traffic from down in there, Fierceness.
Yeah, but it's really not a 2 turn to 1 turn typical situation, because of this unique start on the turn where they angle in. So I don't think that, the start of the configuration is going to hurt him. I mean, Fierceness, I am a Fierceness fanboy. I always have been at 2 and at 3. So, I'm kind of rooting for him as a racing fan. But a couple of years ago, I mean, White Barrio, and we know he likes his track. I mean, his Whitney, was really a powerful race. And so I just think it's the two of them. And I think, frankly, any money that the others take is just free money.
Andy, do you share the same sentiment with regards to Fierceness as Steve does?
Yeah, I would give him certainly give him the edge, and I mean he, most of his races have been, been longer. I mean, White Barrio at least has, shown ability to win at. And win big at 7 furlongs. So maybe he's a little better suited to 1 mile. But I just think Fierceness is narrowly the better horse.
White Barrio is making his 3rd try to win the Met Mile. He's back in top form, I believe. He's coming in off a short break. Andy, what about you? What about White Barrio? Would it surprise you if he were to upset Fierceness?
No, not at all. I mean, it's a 2-horse race, so I mean that I think by the process of elimination, you got to consider.
Steve, same with you. White Barrio over Fierceness.
Well, certainly, I would think they're going to be something like 4 to 5, 6 to 5. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a huge upset if White Barrio wins and pays 440.
All right, Fierceness and White Barrio are going to take most of the action. Both Steve and Andy like Fierceness to defeat White Barrio. I went a little bit different direction. I think White Barrio can wear down Fierceness, and I do respect Raging Torrent on the front end because, as you guys said, speed is always dangerous. So Steve and Andy both like Fierceness over White Barrio. I like White Barrio over Raging Torrent. Okay, before we sign off, we did have a few questions from viewers, and we're going to go ahead and go through some of those questions right now. Hope that's okay. And the first question is, most of these questions, by the way, refer to the Belmont Stakes. Do you think either Crudo or Rodriguez can clear the field and win going gate to wire? I do believe that Rodriguez has a shot to steal it at a price. Andy and Steve, I know that you guys probably disagree. You want to add anything to that potential theft idea of Rodriguez?
My answer is no.
No, just a straight flat no. That's good enough. Okay, we talked a little bit about journalism running 3 times in 5 weeks. I don't think that's an issue as much as the fact that his 2 main rivals have had a longer break, but I don't think it's a negative on journalism. Andy, what about the 3 starts in 5 weeks for journalism?
No, as we were saying earlier, I mean, horses have done it through much of the history, so I think he should be quite capable.
We had a question that said there's not a whole lot of sample size for these horses at Saratoga. Do you upgrade or downgrade any of these horses based on the Saratoga track surface? Steve, what about you?
No, I mean, Saratoga track surface, is a very good one. It's similar to what these horses have been running and training on, so that doesn't bother me.
Okay, I agree. Which of the let's see, where are we at? If it rains, that's where we're at in the wet weather. If it were to rain and the track comes up wet, would that make you change your opinion in any way? For me, considering that the top three finishers in the Kentucky Derby ran well over a wet track, I don't think it makes any difference. But Steve, I'll ask you the same question. What if the track comes up wet? Does it change anything for your handicapping approach?
Not really. And, I thought it was interesting when you said that the first three, have all run on a sloppy track in the Derby. It was the first time that a couple of the California horses had even seen a wet track because they so rarely train on one. So, the fact that they handled it as well as they did, I think speaks well, especially for Baeza.
Very good. Andy, what about you? If the track comes up wet, I assume you have the same take?
Journalism and on a sloppy track, and so I would think it would favor him. I mean, as I look at these two horses, as believing in journalism as I do, I wonder if perhaps Sovereignty's win over him was a function of liking the track. I don't know. I can't answer that, but I mean, it's possible. We certainly know he can run well in the mud.
We had a question regarding value in the Belmont Stakes. Which of the three favorites would offer the most value to each of you based on their morning line odds? I think that Steve and I both kind of answer that. We like Baeza and we'll be salivating at odds of 4-1. But Andy, is 8-5 on journalism a fair enough price?
No, I mean,
okay.
I mean, he as I said, he did lose fair and square in the Kentucky Derby, so I'm not going to salivate over 8-5.
I wouldn't either. Not at 8-5 against Sovereignty and Baeza, who are two very, very good horses. We had a question about Sovereignty's post position. In post 2, is it really that bad given his running style? I think it's pretty clear. Steve, does it make any difference where Sovereignty was going to draw in this race?
No, because he's going to drop back anyway and work out a trip after doing that. So no, I don't think it makes any difference for him.
Somebody was watching the Preakness and wrote in this question, and he or she said, in the Preakness, Rispoli had to get after journalism. Does that indicate anything? I don't think you can say for sure that it indicates something specific, but I found it rather uncomfortable when a horse like journalism lost his interest and lost his focus on the far turn. It looked like he was going nowhere. Now he got going again, but for that one brief instant, I wasn't sure that journalism was even going to hit the board. So it was a little disconcerting to me, but I'm always trying to pick a hole in a favorite. That's the only one I can come up with, and I really don't know if it's legitimate. Final question. Do you think putting journalism in this race is wise with no Triple Crown to be won? Andy?
It's still the Belmont Stakes. It's $1 million, and why not? I mean, he's certainly in the form of his life. If you don't run under these circumstances, what are you waiting for?
Steve, what about you? Does it make sense to put journalism in this race, even though there's no Triple Crown on the line?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a thing called the 3-year-old championship, which is up for grabs. And, Derby winner versus Preakness winner is really not a bad banner for the Belmont Stakes in any year. So I'm glad that people have participated as much as they have in this Triple Crown.
So are we all, and it should be a dynamite race on Saturday at Belmont Park, and I think journalism makes sense to be in this race. It's a $2 million race. He has a score to settle with Sovereignty. Maybe Baeza has a score to settle with both of them. That's going to be a wrap for Daily Racing Forum's webinar. It's a super card on Saturday at Saratoga. Andy Beyer likes journalism to win the Belmont. Steve Crist and myself, Brad Free, both like Baeza to spring an upset. Andy and Steve both think that Fierceness is the horse to beat in the Met Mile. I took the second choice, White Abarrio. So, who do you like this weekend in the Belmont Stakes at Belmont Park? For Andy Beyer and Steve Crist, I'm Brad Free, and we'll talk to you next time.